Hello, everyone. I'm going to try a new kind of content. I'll be writing articles each week on my Substack, so you can subscribe at foodlies.substack.com. And then I'll be doing videos where I go over what we talk about in the article and maybe put some graphics over it, maybe help explain them a little more. I'm not going to be doing much editing on this, so please bear with me. Hope you like it. Today, we're talking about satiety, weight loss, and optimum nutrition. So I always say you can lose weight on any diet. This is pretty meaningless. A professor lost weight on a Twinkie diet. He lost 27 pounds by eating nothing but Twinkies. This is stupid. Who cares? Anyone can lose weight in a calorie deficit, but he's starving. He was starving all the time, and it's complete garbage nutrition. We know this, all right? So to formulate an actual dietary strategy that's going to work long term, you need to know, can you maintain this enjoyably, and is it going to give you optimum nutrition? This is what you need to care about. That's it. And when you care about these things, you need to think about satiety and nutrient density. So these are some of my favorite topics, right? So for all of history, humans did this naturally. We ate whole foods, we were satiated properly, and we had ideal body composition, pretty much. I mean, yes, maybe we got a little heavier leading up to the winter, and then we could have lost that weight over the course of the winter, and we had more access to, tons of sugar and more fruit and more fat and sugars together in the fall, and we could have gained weight for the winter. So we didn't have processed foods. That's the big thing. Now we're awash in processed foods. It's everywhere, and I think it's the biggest problem. And I think there's really a linear correlation to how many processed foods people eat and how overweight they are. It's not always true, but if someone is very overweight, I think it's because they eat a lot of processed foods. Some people can get away with it. But in this graphic, I try to show this, where each level of processing increases palatability and overconsumption. So this is not a perfect diagram. There are exceptions to this. I'm not saying that if you make ground beef from whole steak, that it all of a sudden becomes not nutritious. It just might make you eat a bit more of it. So, and then you add seasoning, and then you can eat a little bit more. And then you add a bun and ketchup and all these cheese and all these things like that, and you can eat tons of them, and then you have fast food. So that's one example. Almonds, again, you break it down, get into flour, you can eat more of it, then you can season it, you can eat more of it, and put it into a cookie. The point is, as you process it more, either mechanically or cooking it or seasoning it, or worst off, adding sugar, refined grains, vegetable oils, stuff like that, it gets less healthy, or it gets easier to overeat, or both. And there's many examples of this. And I think this is really important to think about. And not many people think about this because I guess you can't really measure satiety. I got into this a lot with Gabor Udosi. So he's a really interesting guy. It's in this episode 21 of Peak Human Podcast. And he talks about the hormone signaling in our small intestine and how when you process down plant foods, especially carbohydrates, you get more of a glucose response to this because you take it out of the whole food matrix. You remove the fiber from it, and now the glucose hits your gut faster. There's all kinds of things like GLP and GIP-1, all kinds of hormones going on in the gut. You can learn more about them by listening to my podcast I did with him. Again, that's Peak Human number 21. Super interesting stuff. He did some YouTube videos as well on this. Presentations that are really great. And so this processing stuff is super interesting. Gabor also talks about in the presentation and on my podcast about people who eat foods in the very raw form, unprocessed form. They lose too much weight. They're underweight. This is the classic vegan that looks emaciated. Or I've heard of people doing raw animal-based diets and they become very thin. Your body takes a lot of energy to break down foods if they're not cooked, and also can't extract all the nutrition from them. I mean, when we developed fire as humans, that helped us gain more nutrition from the foods. So you do not want to eat a purely raw diet. For the Food Lies film, we actually have some paleoanthropologists talking about we can't go eat like our ancestors and just eat a raw plant-based diet. Our brains can't derive enough nutrition from raw plant-based foods. Temporarily, people can do it, but it's not going to work long term. And yeah, I don't think those people are doing well. So it's interesting that the more you want to lose weight, the more whole foods you should eat. Really, if you eat the most unprocessed version of a diet, I think you will lose weight the fastest. And there's a lot to this. Part of it is because protein. So protein is huge. It helps keep you full. Back to the satiety thing. It takes a lot of energy for your body to even digest. It's called the thermic effect of food, TEF. And so your body burns more calories just digesting protein. So that's a benefit. It also is known as the most satiating macronutrient. And again, it goes into some of these GLP-1, neuropeptide YY, CCK, all this stuff that scientists look at to show why it's satiating. But protein basically is a different kind of macro than carbs or fat, right? It's a building block. It's not an energy source. So protein is good. If you want to lose weight, you would eat the most unprocessed version of foods in their whole form, and you'd eat a lot of protein. And I think this has been shown in many of the people I work with Dr. Gary at Evolve Healthcare, it works in myself, works in all kinds of people I know. So another thing would be the hyperpalability aspect of this. So when you add seasonings and you add all these flavors, you can eat more of them, right? And that's not a good thing. Dorito Effect is a great book by Mark Schatzker. I interviewed him on the Peak Human podcast as well. I interviewed him a second time for his new book, The End of Craving. But there's a lot going on here with what causes people to overeat. And a lot of it also has to do with nutrients. If you're not getting enough nutrients, your body keeps wanting to eat more to find those nutrients. This has been shown in animals. I talked about this with Dr. Fred Provenza as well, how we see this in animal studies. We see this in humans as well. So check out those podcasts. And so the bottom line is, if you want to eat less, you need to find out why you're eating too much. And I think it's because the foods we eat. You can't just arbitrarily cut calories and expect to lose weight. That doesn't work. You can't just eat the same foods and expect to just eat less of them. That's just a recipe for being hungry all the time. This doesn't really make sense. And that's why we see, I think, that 98%, 95% of diets fail. Because people are just trying to eat the same foods and eat less of them. That doesn't work. You have to change the foods you eat. This is why the mainstream dietary advice is so wrong. They just say count your calories. They don't differentiate between protein and other calories. They don't differentiate for processed foods compared to whole foods. It's insane. It's insane. And I think why that happens is because so much of the food industry is funding all this stuff. They're funding research for it. They're funding the schools where this is taught. They're funding the education. Doctors don't learn much of this at all. And what they do learn is straight from really these bad studies, I think, that are funded by the food industry. So this is because all the money is in the processed foods, right? If you have all these profits, you can use all that money to lobby and create advertising campaigns and further promote your foods. So it all makes sense. Some other things that's wrong with our standard dietary advice is we have this notion that we need to eat, a whole array of fruits and vegetables, or we need to eat 7 to 11 servings of grains, or salt is bad, or saturated fat is bad. All these things skew everything away from eating nutrient-dense, high-satiety foods like meat and fat. See, that's the problem. So they can't focus on these things like satiety, because if you did focus on that, your conclusion would be eat meat, eat steak, eat, all these high-fat, satiating foods. So they can't say that because they have this skewed opinion, and we think we need tons of fiber and tons of this and tons of that. It's not true. Although fiber can help, right? Fiber can, if you leave it in the whole food matrix, it can be good to slow down the absorption of glucose. So it's a nuanced topic. So, okay, putting it all together. To have a sustainable weight loss plan that's actually healthy, you need to focus much more than cutting calories. So you need to factor in the level of processing of the foods you eat, because that likely determines how much you'll eat. So that's huge. I think you need to start listening to your body. When you look at a meal, you should think, how long is this going to keep me full for? And if you actually start figuring that out and tracking it, you'll see if you eat a granola bar or cereal or some of these processed foods, you're hungry very soon. I love this in my interview with Stan Efferding. He said a trick to get people who want to be bodybuilders and eat more is to eat a Dorito. If you eat one Dorito, even if you're full, you'll be hungry soon. It's such a good example of what not to do. So I think you should focus on protein and processing. Those are the number one things you should look at. Get enough protein. make sure the food is not processed, and you're likely going to be more full for longer. There's way more downsides to eating processed foods as well, which everyone's probably aware of, and we can get into it another time. But the main idea is to focus on protein and unprocessed foods, and you'll be good. So this means meat, it means seafood, this means eggs, this means hopefully raw dairy, whole foods of any kind. You can fill in your diet with, once you get that base of protein and natural fats that come along with it, then you can fill in your diet with other unprocessed foods. I don't think it really matters that much if you go carbs or fat these days. You can fill in your energy needs with a potato, which is actually highly satiating. There's 1995 Holt data that shows it's a satiating food, or just more fat. So I think it matters less what you fill in the rest of your energy needs with, that last part of your diet. It's mainly you need to get it in an unprocessed form, and you need to get that high foundation of protein, fats that come along with it, and nutrients. So get your animal protein, eat nose to tail. That's another thing, getting all those highly nutritious bits. I think that helps keep you full as well when you're getting full nutrients, when you add in some of the organ meats and some bone marrow and these other things, that bone broth, that help give you the full spectrum of nutrients like collagen, instead of just getting muscle meat all the time. I think that helps. You can get some of our stuff at Nose to Tail. We help you get organ meats in your diet with like our primal ground beef that has the organs mixed in, stuff like that. And get rid of those processed foods. They're bad for so many reasons, especially for keeping you full. So just eat unprocessed carbs or fat to fill in the rest of your diet. Eat your protein, and you will be likely very healthy, very satiated. You won't overeat, and you'll be in a great position for long-term health. Thanks, everyone.